Oregon with a "how do you like me now" kind of moment, to quote the late, great Toby Keith. 32-31 was the final in Autzen over Ohio State. We already did our game reaction to this game, but I want to really zero in on what this means for Oregon and maybe just where Oregon's at overall. Because what I said at the top of this thing is exactly how I feel that the majority of Oregon fans feel, how the majority of, I would imagine, the building in Autzen, the people in that locker room can feel and potentially do feel. We'll talk about all that right now. Make sure you are subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. Oregon fans, y'all have been good to us. We appreciate you being good to us. We would love for y'all to keep being good to us and subscribe to the channel. Also, follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at JD Pickell, whether to talk some smack or to let me know what you thought about the game yesterday, and we appreciate you so much for that. I'll start right there, man. I'm a little bit embarrassed today, all right? Because I sat at this very desk in, I guess it was early August, and I said, y'all, I think the Oregon Ducks are going to beat Ohio State not one, not two, but 3 times. And I got clowned for it. I didn't care. I wore that, stood on business, ball up top. I think Oregon's a really good football team. I think it's going to happen. The season progressed, and y'all be real, I wavered a little bit. I saw the first couple of games, and I didn't sell any Oregon stock now. Make no mistake about it. It wasn't so much what I thought of Oregon. It was more so what I thought of Ohio State. I thought Ohio State, and still think, is a really good football team. And that game came down to the final play, and it could have gone either way. But at the end of the day, man, that's on me. So Oregon fans, I was wrong about your football team. I switched my pick last week when it came to the game itself. That's on me. So, hey, from me to you, I apologize. I was not familiar with your game, to quote the great Shaquille O'Neal. But how many times have we heard this about Oregon? To zoom out and look at the big picture narrative, even going into this year. Yeah, that's cool. Oregon's got all this hype, but they'll fold when they play somebody. Yeah, but, are they really going to be a team that can win something? That was a big thing people would like to say. Yeah, but what if they won? They point to the Pac-12 championship game they lost against Washington, point to some other spots where Oregon had stumbled, point to the Georgia game, which was Dan Lanning's first game ever as the head coach, which is a weird thing to point to, but it is what it is. They also like to say, oh, man, they're all flash. They're all flash, and guess what? Money can't buy you championships. As if everybody else is just like, NIL, no, we don't do that, which, another conversation for another time. All flash, no substance. Cool uniforms, but when it comes down to it, what is Oregon really? Well, what Oregon is really is they just beat the best roster in college football in Ohio State. And that's not me talking down on Oregon's roster. You look at what Ohio State has, they are stacked with NFL players, both for next year's draft and drafts to come. Like, they are stacked. Speaking of NIL, they also participated in that game, all right? Just so we're on the same page. New college football. This is proof now, we said it in our game reaction, that one, college football is electric. We already knew that. Last night embodied that. If you were to show somebody a college football game to get them hooked on the sport, last night would be a pretty good gateway drug, if you will. Also, it was proof that we can't judge teams by what they do in September. And I said this is not why I picked against Oregon, but I think it's something that we should, circle up on and talk about together. When Oregon looked lackluster against Idaho and looked subpar against Boise State, which is a good football team now, by the way, the Broncos, everyone said, they must not be who we thought they were. They must be overrated. I can't believe that we fell for it. The portal and Dylan Gabriel and this and that. And there was all these different narratives that were just flying around. And we actually held the line on this show and said, listen, man, like it's 2 games with some crucial portal pieces that are trying to get acclimated. And also, they're keeping it pretty vanilla. Like, I would wait to judge Oregon just yet. In fact, if you're selling Oregon stock, I'll happily take some. All right? Notice, Oregon was consistently in hotel playoff for us, all right? This game should be, if you're Dan Lanning, validation of everything he's done since he got there. Because you saw last night, like, this wasn't a Oregon team that Dan Lanning just inherited and happened to play well against Ohio State. Like, last night was no coincidence. There was nothing chance about how Oregon played last night against Ohio State. You saw the culture. Play like a Dan Lanning team. You think Dan Lanning, what do you think? You think energy? You think intense? You think relentless? You think passion? You think aggressive? That was Oregon last night. The squib kick that turned out to be an onside kick. I loved that. And let's pause right there too. Let's rewind a little bit. Go back to the Washington game last year in the regular season. Everyone is having just an open season on Dan Lanning because he wants to trust in his football team, God forbid, and go after points and go after first downs to try and put the game away. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's so dumb. Aggressive yesterday pays off. Everyone's like, oh man, Dan Lanning, so aggressive. See how quickly that narrative changed? See how quickly everyone wants to just look through a different perspective? You don't get to, and this is me getting on my soapbox, I apologize. You don't get to dog a guy for being aggressive when it doesn't pay off and then praise him when it does and have those two different vantage points. You ride with your guy with him being aggressive, and that's why Dan Lanning is who he is, and that's why Oregon has success, I believe, because of them taking on, again, his aggressive approach to the game and the enthusiasm, the emotion, all those things. So to put it simply here, we went out on a tangent a little bit there. To get back on track, this is a Dan Lanning culture internally at Oregon. And you saw it yesterday with how they approached that game, with how they finished, how they kept coming back for more. He talked about throwing jabs. Oregon threw jabs all night long. All night long. This roster, Oregon's got a really good roster. This is a Dan Lanning roster, a roster he's built since he got there. Goes to the portal, gets a Dylan Gabriel, gets an Evan Stewart who goes over 100 yards last night, gets a Derek Harmon. This is a roster that, again, reflects the resources at Oregon, reflects the priorities at Oregon, reflects the aggressive dog nature of Dan Lanning on the recruiting trail. This is Dan Lanning's roster at Oregon. This is his football team. We see that again. The culture, the roster, and I think the execution. Won the turnover battle, won the penalty battle. Discipline. Overall, I understand there's that one penalty that was just egregious from Trayshawn Holden, which I think you put in a different category. But overall, for the most part, Oregon, the more disciplined football team when it came to the turnover battle and not shooting themselves in the foot. So, again, as I said at the top of this thing, this is not a we've arrived kind of win, I don't think, for Dan Lanning and company, because what they would describe as arriving, I would imagine, is winning some more hardware. Like winning a Big Ten title would feel like a we've arrived kind of deal. Winning a national championship obviously would be a we've arrived kind of deal. But just what I said, man, to quote Toby Keith, rest in peace, this is a how do you like me now kind of win. Because all the narratives, all the talk, all the things said about how Oregon, was just potential, was just a fun talking point for folks in the media to get clicks. Like, this is tangible. This is real. Something you can point to and say, no. That's what Dan Lanning has built. And you got to win over a top 3 team in America to prove it. Against the best roster in college football to prove it. So the question now is, can you sustain it? Because it's great to beat Ohio State, but ask Bama about big wins and how you handle success after that and what can happen to you. All right? Still have Illinois. Got to go to Michigan. Got to go to Wisconsin. You got Washington. Likely, I'll just say this, you probably are going to see Ohio State again in the Big Ten title game. Can you beat Ohio State a second time? Remains to be seen. But in terms of the regular season, this is the toughest hurdle you had left on your schedule. You just cleared it. If you're Oregon, man, you have proven to yourself that your process internally is validated. Absolutely validated. And Dan Lanning said that in his post-game press conference. He's like, we don't look for external validation or outside noise. Like, we worry about validating our process. Well, last night is a process-validating win in every way, shape, and form. I cannot wait to see what they do for the rest of the season. Can't wait to see how they respond and handle success. Got a feeling now with Dan Lanning overseeing this operation and the way that Oregon football team talked about success last night and talked about the win last night, I think they're going to handle it the right way. Let me know your thoughts on how Oregon got the job done last night over Ohio State. Again, Duck fans, hand up on me. And we appreciate y'all being dialed in. Appreciate y'all being subscribed. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.